Hello, I am Xarkun and this is World of Warships Legends. Today I want to talk about when to push versus when to play passively in a battleship. And I want to go over some stuff that I've gone over before in terms of how to position your battleship to get the most out of it. Today we're playing the Tier 7 Tech Tree US Battleship Iowa, which was my very first battleship, my very first Tier 7 ship, for that matter, in this game. And I blame Spartan Elite 43 for causing me to pursue this ship early on in my shooty boats career. When I first started playing this game, Spartan Elite 43 was the content creator that I discovered first, followed shortly by T-Bull, and so I watched a lot of Spartan videos. At that time, he was playing the Iowa quite a bit, and he made it look really good, which is why I pursued it as my very first Tier 7 ship. And it is a good ship. It was a good ship back then. It remains a very good ship to this day, despite those people on the World of Warships Legends official Discord server that go around saying, quote, Iowa bad, end quote. I don't know if that's supposed to be serious, or if that's ironic, or if they just say that to ruffle some feathers, but whatever the reason they say that for, they are incorrect. The Iowa is a fantastic ship. It's one of the oldest Tier 7 Tech Tree ships in the game, and yet it still has a place in this game. I don't feel like it's been power crept very much at all. It's got very long range on its very accurate guns, and the armor-piercing performance of its AP shells are almost second to none, honestly. The American AP is very, very good, due in large part to its improved penetration angles. Anyway, as far as when you should push versus not push in a battleship, note that we've come out here onto a flank. A little bit different than the way that I might prefer to play this battleship, which, if I had my way, it would be in the center of the map with my teammates pushing out into a flank, and I would use the long range and accuracy of the Iowa's guns to punish the broadsides of the enemy ships that were coming to counter them. But my team is not pushing at all. You can see most of them are clustered up in the friendly base, whereas the enemy team is spreading out all across the map. Well, maybe not all across the map. In fact, the enemy is sending the bulk of their forces over to this side of the map. And because we recognize that there are 4 ships out here, that causes us to turn away. We do not turn in. That is something that I really have been trying to impress upon battleship players lately. There is no value in turning to face the enemy with your bow and, quote, bow tanking them when there are this many enemies in one spot on the map. All bow tanking does is ensure that you are a stationary target for all 4 of these ships, including that Tirpitz over there. If I were to be facing bow in versus this Gneisenau, this Georgia, this York, and now with the Tirpitz on my flank, I think they'd be shooting at me a lot more. I think they'd want another piece of me. Why? Well, because even if you're bow tanking, you can still be damaged into your superstructure with battleship caliber AP. Potentially your guns may be taken out. And of course, there's always the high explosive spam to contend with. And sitting bow in means you don't have many choices to disengage, right? The only options you have available to you if you need to disengage because you're being focused too much and you're sitting bow in, option 1 is to reverse. And this is, of course, a very slow way to try to disengage. In fact, it's not going to help you disengage at all. You're just going to slowly get further away from the enemies that are focusing you. And if there's nothing to stop them from pushing into you, then they're just going to make up that distance quicker than you can create it, because ships go faster when they're going forward, is the bottom line there. I know, very simple point to make, but a point to be made nonetheless. And if you choose not to reverse because you're getting focused down while you're bow in, and you need to disengage from the situation even quicker, then your only other option is to perform a complete 180-degree turn, probably show your flat broadside to whatever ships are focusing you down, and that is a recipe for a quick ticket back to port. Thus, the way that you keep yourself safe in a battleship is you find a position where you can push up close to the enemy team, close enough to be safe, and then you turn so that you're angled away from them, and in that way, you can keep all of your guns on target, and you can disengage when the enemy starts pushing in without too much risk to your ship. And that's what we've done here. Meanwhile, our teammates still, once again, are clustered together in a black hole of doom inside of our blue base. And we've lost 2 cruisers to the enemy's 1. So things aren't looking so great in this game. And part of that, I think, has to do with the lack of destroyers, something I haven't pointed out, but something that I also touched upon in another video this week, where I got another game with no destroyers. And as I said in that video, if you're the kind of battleship player who finds themselves being torpedoed and sent back to port by destroyers on the enemy team, you might be happy to find yourself in a game without destroyers. But I'm not happy to find myself in a game without destroyers. Actually, I think it kind of sucks, and I think part of the reason that there are 4 ships clustered inside of the friendly base right now is because they don't have vision on the enemies. Note that there are 3 enemy ships on that section of the map, and not a single one of them is spotted. And they are 2 cruisers and 1 battleship. You can see their grayed out line to, I guess, the right on the mini-map of the black hole spud cluster inside of our base. And you know, if those islands weren't separating my teammates from the enemies over there, then surely my teammates would have vision of those enemy ships. In fact, one of the battleships, or the only battleship over there rather, comes into view as he starts pushing in to my teammates inside of our base. Part of the reason they're not spotted and vision is so hard to come by in this game is because there are no destroyers. And you want destroyers in your game, on your team, and, well, you don't really want them on the enemy team, I suppose, because destroyers are a thing that stops battleships from pushing. But you want the destroyers to be on your team because you want them to get vision of the enemies, and that is the one thing about battleships. In fact, let me tell you a little bit of a story from PC, where I was finally able to grind enough coal to get the American premium battleship Kearsarge. Kearsarge is a hybrid battleship with 12 16-inch guns and the ability to launch a rocket attack plane squadron like aircraft carriers from the flight deck on its ship. And with that squadron, you can go out and you can preemptively spot any ships that are too stealthy for you to otherwise close in on and spot, like destroyers, for example. That is the big downside of the battleship, is the fact that it can't spot for itself, really. It has to rely on its teammates to do that. And by not spot for itself, I mean not spot effectively. In order for me to spot the cruisers in this game, for example, they have much better concealment than I do. I would have to push in quite far so that my ship was actually inside their detectability ring on the minimap. And pushing in that far often means overextending. So that is really the reason why battleships cannot spot for themselves. They're just too conspicuous. They'll get outspotted by many other ships that they didn't initially see. And pushing into ships to spot them is usually a recipe for disaster, and thus you want destroyers on your team to be able to spot the enemies for you. Destroyers can get much closer to the enemies without being spotted, and in fact that is the way they spot. And their spotting directly benefits you, gives you targets to shoot at. Plus, they're out there, hopefully, spotting the enemy destroyers, revealing their location on the minimap so that you can know how to position your ship to avoid any torpedoes that may be sent your way, or you can at least know the direction from which torpedoes are likely to come. Furthermore, if you have cruisers like this Charles Martel and the other cruiser out there hiding behind islands, spamming you with HE, and you have no way to get vision on them to shoot back at them, well, if there's a destroyer on your team, he can probably go around the island. He can probably get a line of sight on these two cruisers, reveal them to you on the surface of the sea. You can take aim at them, shoot them over the islands, counter them that way. So there are a lot of reasons why you would want destroyers in your games, and primarily spotting is the number one reason. Without that spotting, I think it encourages people to play much more passively, and then whichever team decides not to play super passively and not to vector their entire fleet into the same section of the map, well, that team is likely to win. And that's what's happening here with the enemy team. Whereas my team clustered up all together inside of our base, apart from me and the friendly Amagi, who has sort of been shadowing me this whole game, and there might have been a cruiser with us on that flank that we initially pushed into. Apart from us, the rest of our team has been only in one section of the map, allowing the enemy to spread out in a pretty effective battle line all around the map, have shots on us from all kinds of different angles, and be able to push in from every section of the map completely unimpeded. In fact, the only reason that the enemy team over here on this side of the map, composed of the Iowa, the Georgia, this München, the York, whatever other cruisers out there, the only reason they haven't pushed in further is because the Amagi and myself were over there sort of fighting a delaying action, kiting away from them, and I might add, racking up a respectable amount of damage, at least on my part, in the process. We're already nearly up to 140,000 damage, and we're going to get more before this game ends. Meanwhile, contrast that to what the enemy team did. You know, they sent like half their fleet to our flank, and the other half of their fleet to this flank, and this flank was able to push in, totally eliminate all of my teammates clustered up together inside of the base, and now the enemy is knocking on our door, and it's 4 versus 2. The Amagi survived, shadowing me throughout this entire game, but his luck has gone out, and he has been sunk, leaving me the only ship left alive against 4 ships. And I know what you may be thinking. You may be thinking, ah yes, an opportunity for a solo warrior. And that is what I was thinking as well. I was thinking this Albemarle was certainly going to go down after that Citadel right through his stern, but of course the second salvo we land on him only results in a single penetration, and being a British cruiser, the Albemarle has that improved heal, which as you can see has allowed him to gain a lot of hit points back. In fact, in order to sink him, we'd probably have to Citadel him again and get some extra change in damage to boot. Meanwhile, the München is able to shoot us with impunity from behind that island, completely unspotted. We have no way of getting vision on him, and because the München is a German cruiser, he gets the special high explosive penetration characteristics. And I believe the Iowa's midship deck armor is like 38 millimeters, but I think the München can actually penetrate that. So really, there was no getting out of that. That was quite a sticky situation, and ultimately we were sunk. But we racked up 170,000 damage in the process, and we did that by fighting a delaying action on our flank, which is sometimes one of the nicest places to be in a battleship, provided your team actually does its job. Unfortunately, ours did not here. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.